You stopped accommodating them, and something in their psychology lit up. Not the warm, comfortable attraction they felt when you were patient and understanding and making space for their limitations. This is different. This is arousal mixed with anxiety, desire mixed with fear. Intense focus on you that wasn't there when you were focused on them. You started prioritizing your own needs, stopped organizing your schedule around their availability, began making decisions based on what serves you rather than what keeps them comfortable. And the avoidant who was lukewarm when you were giving everything is suddenly hot when you're giving nothing. They're texting more, they're initiating plans, they're actually pursuing you in ways they never pursued when you were the one pursuing them. The shift is confusing until you understand what's happening in their psychology. Avoidants are wired to want what they can't easily have, to value what requires effort to obtain, to be attracted to people who are slightly out of reach. Your selfishness, your focus on yourself, your unavailability for their convenience, your clear prioritization of your own life over their access to you is creating exactly the conditions that trigger their desire. You're no longer the sure thing. You're no longer the person organizing your life around them. You're someone with your own priorities who might not be available when they want you. And that unavailability is activating their attachment system in ways your constant availability never did. What the avoidant is responding to isn't actually selfishness in the negative sense. It's self-possession. You possess yourself now. You're not giving yourself away, not making yourself small to fit their limitations, not suppressing your needs to avoid triggering their withdrawal. You're taking up space, claiming your time, enforcing boundaries that protect your energy and your priorities. And the avoidant is attracted to this because self-possessed people are rare in their experience. Most people they date either become anxious and pursuing, or they're avoidant themselves and create dynamic when nobody's really present. But you being self-possessed, focused on yourself without being cold, unavailable without being punishing, clear about your priorities without apologizing for them, this is creating dynamic the avoidant psychology responds to intensely. You're demonstrating that you don't need them, and not needing them makes them want to be needed by you. You're showing that your life is full without them, and your fullness makes them want to be part of what fills you. You're proving that you'll be fine whether they step up or not. And your fineness without them is creating urgency they never felt when you were clearly not fine without them, when your happiness seemed dependent on their presence and behavior. The turn-on is happening because your self-focus is removing the pressure the avoidant felt when you were other-focused. When you were focused on them, checking in on them, trying to meet their needs, working to maintain the connection, they felt responsible for your emotional state in ways that created pressure to reciprocate, pressure to meet you, pressure to be more available than felt comfortable. The pressure triggered their withdrawal because pressure makes avoidance retreat. But now you're focused on yourself and the pressure is gone. They're not responsible for your happiness because you're clearly handling your own happiness. They're not responsible for meeting your needs because you're meeting your own needs. The absence of pressure is creating space where the avoidant can actually feel their own desire for you without the desire being contaminated by obligation or guilt about not being able to meet you. Your selfishness freed them from responsibility, and freedom from responsibility is allowing genuine desire to surface. Desire to be close to you because they want to, not because you need them to. The specific behaviors that trigger the avoidance attraction response, when you cancel plans with them because something better came up, when you choose your own priority over their convenience without guilt or extensive explanation, the avoidant feels a spike of attraction that surprises them. They're used to being the person who cancels, who changes plans, who prioritizes their own needs without apology. But you doing it, you valuing your own time and opportunities enough to deprioritize them when something more important or appealing emerges, creates immediate shift in how they perceive you. You're not the accommodating person anymore. You're someone with standards, with options, with life full enough that they're not automatic priority. The cancellation without guilt is particularly powerful because it demonstrates you're not afraid of losing them. Fear of loss makes people accommodating. Absence of that fear makes people selective. And selective people are attractive to avoidance because selectivity implies value. If you're selective about who gets your time, then your time must be valuable. And if they've been receiving your time, it means they've been receiving something valuable. But now that you're withdrawing easy access to your valuable time, they want it more intensely, because humans want what requires effort to obtain more than they want what's freely given. When you stop initiating contact and the avoidant notices that days are passing without hearing from you, they start thinking about you more. The thinking is obsessive quality that wasn't there when you were regularly reaching out. When you were initiating, they could be passive. They knew you'd text eventually, knew you'd check in, knew the connection was being maintained by your effort, so they didn't have to exert effort themselves. But your silence creates void, where your predictable contact used to be, and the void is uncomfortable. The discomfort drives them to think about you more than they thought about you when you were present. They're wondering what you're doing, whether you're thinking about them, why you're not reaching out. The wondering is a form of pursuit that's happening internally. An internal pursuit often precedes external pursuit. The avoidant is being pulled toward you by the space you're creating, and the pull is experienced as attraction, because the thinking about you is mixed with desire to hear from you, to know you're still interested, to restore contact that they're now having to be the one to restore. When you talk about your own life with enthusiasm, your projects, your goals, your interests, your social activities, without centering the conversation on the relationship or on them, the avoidant leans in. They're attracted to your animation, to your passion about things that don't involve them, to the sense that you're living fully regardless of what's happening between you. The enthusiasm about your own life is attractive because it signals you're not dependent on the relationship for your fulfillment, not waiting for them to make your life meaningful, not organizing everything around them. Avoidants are repelled by people who make them their whole world, because being someone's whole world is too much pressure. But they're attracted to people who have whole worlds of their own, because joining someone's already full life is optional rather than necessary, is addition rather than foundation, is participating in something that would exist without them rather than being responsible for creating something that wouldn't exist without them. When you enforce boundaries without anger or punishment, when you simply state what works for you and what doesn't, and follow through on consequences when boundaries are crossed, the avoidant respects you in ways they didn't respect you when you were flexible. They're turned on by the clarity, by the self-respect, by the fact that you're not negotiating your boundaries based on their comfort. Avoidants test boundaries constantly, not necessarily consciously, but their patterns involve pushing to see what they can get away with, withdrawing to see if you'll tolerate it, being inconsistent to see if you'll accept inconsistency. When you were accommodating their tests, when you were adjusting your boundaries to keep them comfortable, they lost respect for you even while benefiting from your flexibility. But boundaries that don't move, boundaries enforced calmly and consistently, without needing them to agree with the boundaries, create respect that mixes with attraction. You're demonstrating you can't be controlled or manipulated, and people who can't be controlled are more attractive than people who can be controlled, because control is easy, and easy is boring, but challenge is engaging. When you demonstrate you have other options, not through explicitly mentioning other people, but through living in ways that make clear your life includes possibilities beyond them, the avoidant's competitive instinct activates. They start seeing you as person who could be chosen by others, person who's desirable to others, person they might lose to someone else if they don't step up. When you were fully focused on them, when it was clear you were waiting for them and available to them regardless of their behavior, there was no competition. They had you without having to compete for you. But your self-focus makes you less available, and less availability implies others might have access to what they're not having access to. The possibility of competition creates urgency. The urgency mixes with attraction. They want you more because they might not get you, and might not get you is more arousing than definitely have you to psychology that values what's scarce over what's abundant. Why your self-focus specifically triggers their attachment system, the avoidance attachment system, is paradoxical. It activates not when someone is close and available, but when someone they care about is distant and potentially leaving. When you were focused on them, when you were consistently present and available, their attachment system stayed quiet because there was no threat of loss. You were there. They could take you for granted. The relationship was secure enough that they didn't have to think about it or work for it. But your shift to self-focus is creating threat of loss that the avoidance attachment system is registering as danger. You're not as available. You're not as focused on them. You might be moving away from the relationship emotionally, even if you haven't left physically. The attachment system is responding to these signals by activating, creating anxiety about losing you, creating desire to restore closeness, creating motivation to pursue you in ways they weren't motivated when your presence was guaranteed. Your selfishness is triggering their attachment specifically because it's threatening their access to you, and threatened access activates the attachment system that was dormant when access was secure. Your self-focus is also triggering their attachment system because it's creating mirror of their own behavior that forces them to experience what they've been making you experience. When they withdraw, when they're unavailable, when they prioritize themselves. You used to respond by pursuing them, trying to close the distance they created, working to restore connection, making yourself more available to compensate for their unavailability. Your pursuing allowed them to withdraw without experiencing the consequences of withdrawal, because you were preventing the consequences through your effort to maintain connection. But now you're not preventing consequences. You're mirroring their withdrawal with your own focus on yourself. They withdraw and you don't pursue, you just focus on your own life. They're unavailable and you're unavailable back. Not as punishment, but because you're genuinely occupied with your own priorities. The mirroring is forcing them to feel what it's like to want someone who's not available, to reach for someone who's not reaching back, to be the one doing the pursuing while the other person is focused elsewhere. And feeling this is triggering their attachment system because they're finally experiencing the pursuing side of the dynamic rather than the perpetually pursued side. The self-focus triggers attachment because it's proving you're capable of living without them. And that capability makes them recognize you could leave. When you were organized around them, when your happiness seemed dependent on them, when your life seemed to revolve around the relationship, they knew unconsciously that you wouldn't leave. You were too invested, too attached, too dependent on the connection. But your self-focus is proving you're not dependent. You have your own life, you have your own sources of fulfillment. You're fine with or without them. The proof of your capability to be fine without them is making them realize the relationship is optional for you. And optional means it could end. And it could end activates attachment in ways it will definitely continue doesn't activate attachment. The avoidant is responding to your self-sufficiency with intensified attachment because self-sufficiency in a partner is signal that you could leave at any time. And the possibility of you leaving is finally making them hold on in ways they weren't holding on when they thought you'd never leave, no matter how they treated you. Your self-focus is triggering their attachment because it's changing the power dynamic, and avoidants are attracted to people who have power in the dynamic. When you were accommodating, when you were pursuing, when you were organizing around them, they had all the power. They controlled the pace, the depth, the continuity of the relationship through their withholding. But your shift to self-focus has redistributed power. You have power now through your unavailability, through your clear alternative priorities, through your enforcement of boundaries. The power shift is attractive because avoidants respect power. They're attracted to strength, to people who can hold their own, to people who aren't diminished by the avoidance patterns. Your self-focus is demonstrating strength they didn't know you had, and discovering you're stronger than they thought is creating attraction that wasn't there when they perceived you as weaker through your accommodating behavior. What's actually happening in their psychology when they see you focused on yourself? The avoidant is experiencing cognitive dissonance between their memory of you as accommodating person and their current observation of you as self-focused person. The dissonance creates curiosity. Who are you actually? Were they wrong about you before? Have you changed? Is this new behavior temporary or permanent? The curiosity drives increased attention. They're studying you more carefully, trying to figure out whether this version of you is real or performed. The attention they're giving you, the noticing, the analyzing, the trying to understand, is form of engagement that's deeper than the attention they gave when you were predictable. Predictable is boring. Mystery is engaging. You've become mysterious by behaving differently than they expected. And the mystery is keeping their attention in ways your previous predictable accommodation never kept their attention. The avoidant is also experiencing loss aversion that's stronger than their desire ever was. Loss aversion is a psychological principle that humans fear losing what they have more than they desire gaining what they don't have. When you were fully available, when you were clearly theirs, the avoidant wasn't afraid of losing you, so desire was tepid. But your self-focus is creating possibility of loss, and the fear of losing you is activating loss aversion that's more powerful than attraction was when loss wasn't threatened. They're feeling intensely now not because they desire you more in some deep emotional sense, but because their psychology is responding to threat of loss with panic about preventing that loss. The panic looks like increased interest, increased pursuit, increased attention. But understanding that it's loss aversion rather than genuine increased desire is important, because loss aversion fades once loss is no longer threatened. If you become fully available again, the panic will subside and they'll return to their tepid baseline of taking you for granted. The avoidant is experiencing their own need for you that was hidden when you were meeting that need constantly. When you were accommodating, when you were available, when you were doing the work of maintaining connection, the avoidance need for you was being met so thoroughly that they weren't aware they needed you. Need that's satisfied doesn't register as need, it just registers as background comfort. But your self-focus removed the constant meeting of their need, and now they're experiencing the need directly because it's not being satisfied. They need your attention, and you're not giving it automatically anymore. They need your validation, and you're focused on validating yourself. They need your presence, and you're present to your own life more than to them. The experience of unsatisfied need is uncomfortable, and the discomfort is making them aware they need you more than they realized. The awareness of need is creating desire to restore what satisfied the need. Your attention, your availability, your focus on them. They're being turned on by your selfishness, because your selfishness is revealing their dependence on you that was invisible when you were meeting their dependence automatically. The avoidant is also responding to your self-focus with unconscious recognition that you're modeling behavior they wish they could achieve but can't. The avoidant performs independence, but doesn't feel internally independent. They're defended, isolated, cut off from their own needs and feelings. But you're demonstrating actual independence. You're connected to yourself, clear about your needs, able to prioritize yourself without guilt or defensiveness. The difference between their performance of independence and your actuality of it is visible to them even if they can't articulate it. They're attracted to your self-possession because some part of them recognizes it as what they've been trying to achieve through their defended state, but have never actually achieved. You're showing them what genuine self-possession looks like. Not defensive, not reactive, not afraid of closeness, but simply clear about your priorities and boundaries. The attraction is partly desire to be close to what they wish they embodied, partly recognition that you've achieved something they haven't, partly hope that your self-possession might rub off on them or teach them how to possess themselves in ways that are healthy rather than defended. The trap of thinking their increased interest means you've won. The avoidance increased interest when you focus on yourself is not victory. It's different phase of the same dysfunctional dynamic. What's changed is who's pursuing and who's withholding, not whether the relationship has capacity for mutual presence and vulnerability. You're withholding now through your self-focus, and they're pursuing, but pursuit that's triggered by withholding is not pursuit that creates healthy relationship. It's pursuit that's trying to restore dynamic, where they feel comfortable, where they have access to you, where they can return to their baseline of taking you for granted once they've secured your availability again. If you respond to their increased interest by becoming available again, by returning to your previous accommodation, the interest will evaporate because it was driven by your unavailability, not by their genuine development of capacity to meet you. Thinking you've won, thinking you've figured out how to make the avoidant want you through being selfish, is missing the deeper truth that avoidants who only want you when you're unavailable are avoidants who can't sustain partnership regardless of what strategy you use. Healthy partnership requires both people being able to desire each other when available, being able to maintain attraction when close, being able to value each other when presence is consistent and secure. If the avoidant can only desire you when you're distant, can only value you when you're unavailable, can only pursue you when they're at risk of losing you, then they're incapable of the sustained mutual presence that partnership requires. You haven't won. You've just discovered what activates their desire. But what activates their desire is condition you can't maintain indefinitely without perpetually withholding yourself from the relationship you want. Being perpetually self-focused to keep them interested is not relationship. It's strategy for maintaining their pursuit. But their pursuit that requires your distance is pursuit that prevents actual intimacy. The trap is also that the avoidance increased interest is based on fantasy rather than reality. When you're self-focused and unavailable, they're not experiencing you fully. They're experiencing your absence, and absence creates idealization. They're imagining what it would be like to have your attention, to be close to you, to be with you. The imagination is always better than reality, because imagination doesn't include the uncomfortable parts, the vulnerability required, the consistency demanded, the actual intimacy that would trigger their withdrawal. They're attracted to fantasy, you created by your distance. But if the distance closes, if they get what they think they want, reality will replace fantasy. And reality includes all the things that made them withdraw before. The increased interest is about wanting what they don't have, not about being able to receive what they have once they have it. This means their interest is not sustainable foundation for relationship. It's temporary state that exists only as long as you remain somewhat unavailable. And remaining unavailable forever is not path to partnership. The trap is believing that your self-focus is solution to their avoidant patterns, rather than recognizing its response that protects you but doesn't fix them. Your self-focus is healthy boundary. It's you prioritizing yourself appropriately. It's you refusing to organize your life around someone who won't meet you. These are good things for you regardless of how the avoidant responds. But the avoidant's positive response to your boundaries doesn't mean they've developed capacity to be in relationship with you. It means they're responding to the specific stimulus of potential loss with increased pursuit that will fade if loss stops being potential and you become available. Again, your self-focus protects you from depleting yourself for someone who can't reciprocate. But it doesn't create capacity in them to reciprocate. They're attracted to your boundaries, but that doesn't mean they're capable of respecting your boundaries long term. They're interested in pursuing you, but that doesn't mean they're capable of being with you once pursuit succeeds. The trap is confusing their reaction to your self-focus with actual change in their capacity. When their capacity remains unchanged and their pursuit is just anxiety-driven response to threatened loss that will subside once loss stops being threatened. When self-focus is healthy boundary versus when it's manipulation. Self-focus is healthy boundary when it's genuine. When you're actually prioritizing yourself because you recognize your needs matter, because you're building life that fulfills you, because you're done suppressing yourself to accommodate someone else's limitations. Healthy self-focus doesn't involve performing for the avoidance benefit. It's not strategic unavailability designed to make them chase you. It's not calculated distance intended to trigger their attachment system. It's genuine redirection of your energy toward yourself, because focusing on them wasn't serving you, wasn't reciprocated, wasn't creating relationship you need. Healthy self-focus means you're actually living your life fully pursuing your goals, deepening your friendships, engaging with your interests, building your future. And if the avoidant pursues you because you're genuinely focused elsewhere, that pursuit is happening as response to real change in you. Real shift in your priorities, real evidence that you're moving forward with or without them. The genuineness is what makes it healthy. You're not withholding a strategy, you're protecting your energy and directing it toward things that actually nurture you. Self-focus becomes manipulation when it's performed specifically to get reaction from the avoidant. If you're acting selfish to make them chase you, if you're being unavailable strategically to trigger their attachment, if you're focused on yourself as tactic while actually remaining focused on them mentally, thinking about them constantly, organizing your self-focus around what will impact them, measuring success by whether they pursue you more, then the self-focus is manipulation disguised as boundary. And manipulation doesn't work long-term because it's exhausting to perform, it's inauthentic so you can't sustain it, and it's creating dynamic based on strategy rather than on genuine relating. If your self-focus is manipulation, eventually you'll slip, you'll become available when they pursue, you'll give them the attention they're seeking, you'll drop the performance because you're tired of performing. And when you slip, when you become available again, their interest will fade because the interest was response to your unavailability rather than to you. Manipulation might get short-term result of increased pursuit, but it doesn't create sustainable dynamic, and it doesn't develop their capacity. The difference between healthy boundary and manipulation is also visible in your internal experience. Healthy self-focus feels good. You're engaged with your life, fulfilled by your activities, satisfied by your priorities, at peace with your choices. Manipulation feels stressful. You're constantly wondering if your strategy is working, monitoring whether they're responding the way you want, anxious about whether to maintain the distance or close it, exhausted from performing behavior that isn't natural to you. If your self-focus is draining you, if it's making you more anxious rather than less, if you're thinking about the avoidant more rather than less, then it's not genuine self-focus. It's anxious attachment in disguise. Using strategy of distance instead of strategy of pursuit, but still organized around getting specific response from the avoidant, rather than around genuinely caring for yourself. Healthy self-focus is also sustainable indefinitely. If you're genuinely focused on yourself, on your life, on your goals and relationships and interests, you can maintain that focus whether the avoidant pursues you or not, whether they respond how you want or not, whether the relationship continues or not. Your focus on yourself is independent of their response because it's about you, not about them. But manipulation is not sustainable. It requires constant adjustment based on their response, constant monitoring of whether the strategy is working, constant energy directed toward managing their perception and behavior. If you can only maintain your self-focus as long as they're responding with increased interest, if your focus wavers when their interest wavers, then the focus wasn't genuine, it was strategic. And strategies that depend on specific responses from others are inherently unstable because you can't control other people's responses. What you should do with the avoidant's increased interest when you focus on yourself. If the avoidant pursues you more when you focus on yourself, the right response is not to give them what they're seeking by becoming available again. The right response is to continue your self-focus and require that their pursuit translates into actual behavior change over sustained time before you consider increasing your availability. Their pursuit might be genuine interest, or it might be anxiety about loss, and you can tell which by whether they maintain the pursuit over months, by whether they demonstrate actual capacity for presence and consistency, by whether they pursue therapy to address their patterns. If the pursuit is anxiety-driven, it will fade once they feel secure that they haven't lost you. If the pursuit is genuine, it will persist and evolve into actual behavioral change. Therapy attended consistently, vulnerability demonstrated repeatedly, patterns confronted through professional help rather than just through their own willpower. The right response to their increased interest is also to observe their behavior carefully while maintaining your boundaries. Are they pursuing with words or with actions? Words are easy, saying they miss you, saying they want to try again, saying they'll be different. Actions are evidence, actually scheduling therapy and going consistently, actually showing up for plans they initiate, actually being consistent in their contact over weeks and months, actually demonstrating changed patterns through sustained behavior rather than through promises. Observe whether their pursuit respects your boundaries or pressures you to drop your boundaries. Healthy pursuit respects that you're focused on yourself and asks how they can earn space in your life while understanding you have priorities beyond them. Unhealthy pursuit tries to guilt you for your self-focus, tries to make you feel selfish in the negative sense, tries to pressure you to give them attention and availability they haven't earned through demonstrated capacity to reciprocate that attention and availability. The right response is also to be honest with yourself about whether you want this person if they could actually meet you, or whether you're only interested in their interest because being wanted feels validating. Sometimes people stay engaged with avoidance not because they actually want relationship with that specific person, but because they want validation that comes from being pursued, being wanted, being chosen. If you're continuing to engage with the avoidant primarily because their increased interest feels good, rather than because you genuinely want partnership with them specifically, that's worth examining. You deserve more than relationship that exists primarily to validate you through the other person's pursuit. You deserve relationship with someone who can actually be partner to you, who can sustain presence when they're not at risk of losing you, who can meet you consistently rather than only when they're anxious about loss. Being honest about whether you want them versus whether you want their wanting you is crucial to making good decisions about whether to allow their increased pursuit to lead anywhere. The right response is to remember that their increased interest when you focus on yourself is information about them, not instruction about how to keep them interested. The information is, they're attracted to unavailability more than availability, they pursue when threatened with loss more than when secure in connection. Their desire is triggered by distance rather than by closeness. This information should inform your decisions. Do you want a relationship with someone whose desire depends on your unavailability? Do you want to structure your life around maintaining distance to keep them interested? Do you want partnership where being fully present might make them lose interest? If the answer is no, if you want someone who desires you when you're close, who values you when you're available, who's turned on by intimacy rather than turned off by it, then the avoidant's increased interest when you focus on yourself is information that confirms they're not capable of what you need. Let them pursue. Maintain your self-focus. But don't interpret their pursuit as signal that relationship is now viable. Interpret it as signal that they respond to loss threat. And loss threat is not foundation for partnership you deserve. The deeper truth about avoidant attraction to self-focused partners. The deeper truth is that avoidants are attracted to self-focused people because self-focused people don't require the avoidant to meet them. And not requiring being met is what allows the avoidant to be in relationship without having to face their incapacity. When you're self-focused, when you're meeting your own needs, when you're fulfilled through your own life, the avoidant can be with you without feeling the pressure to provide what they can't provide. They're attracted not just to your unavailability, but to your self-sufficiency, because your self-sufficiency means they're off the hook. They don't have to be emotional available because you don't need their emotional availability. You have your own emotional life. They don't have to be consistent because you don't need their consistency. You have your own sources of stability. They don't have to meet you because you're meeting yourself. This is appealing to someone who's incapable of meeting a partner because it creates relationship that doesn't expose their incapacity. But relationship where one person is perpetually self-focused and the other is perpetually unavailable is not actually relationship. It's two people living parallel lives with occasional intersection. Real partnership requires mutual meeting, requires both people being available to each other, requires interdependence rather than rigid independence. If you maintain your self-focus to keep the avoidant interested, you're preventing the relationship from ever becoming actual partnership. You're creating dynamic where you're independent and they're avoidant, and the space between your independence and their avoidance is space where intimacy should exist but can't exist, because intimacy requires vulnerability and presence that neither position allows for. The avoidant being attracted to your self-focus is trap disguised as solution. It looks like you've figured out how to keep them interested. But what you've actually figured out is how to prevent real relationship by maintaining dynamic where neither person is actually available to the other. The deeper truth is also that what avoidants are attracted to in self-focused partners is what they wish they could be but aren't. They wish they were genuinely self-possessed rather than defended. They wish they were truly independent rather than isolated. They wish they were actually fulfilled through their own life rather than empty beneath their performance of not needing anyone. Your self-focus is showing them what genuine self-possession looks like, and they're attracted to it because they recognize it as superior to their defensive version. But their attraction to your self-possession doesn't mean they're capable of developing their own. It means they're drawn to what they lack, hoping proximity to you will somehow transfer to them what they can't develop in themselves. But character qualities don't transfer through proximity. Self-possession has to be developed through internal work, through therapy, through confronting wounds and building capacity. The avoidant being attracted to your self-focus might eventually motivate them to do that work, but only if they recognize their attraction is showing them something they need to develop, rather than something they need to possess through relationship with you. Avoidants are turned on when you act selfish and focus on yourself, because your self-focus creates conditions their psychology responds to. Unavailability that triggers their attachment system, boundaries that command their respect, self-sufficiency that removes pressure to meet you, mystery that holds their attention. But being turned on by your self-focus is not the same as being capable of partnership with you. It's response to stimulus, not developed capacity for intimacy. Their increased interest when you focus on yourself is real, but it's not sustainable foundation for relationship, unless they do therapeutic work that develops their capacity to maintain interest and presence when you're available, when you're close, when loss is no longer threatened. Your self-focus should remain regardless of their response, not as strategy to keep them interested, but as commitment to yourself, to your own life, to refusing to deplete yourself for anyone who can't reciprocate. If the avoidant pursues you while you're self-focused, let them pursue. But don't drop your self-focus to receive their pursuit. Maintain your boundaries, require evidence of actual change. And remember that being wanted by someone who can only want you when you're unavailable is not being wanted in ways that create partnership. It's being wanted in ways that prevent partnership while creating illusion of connection that can never deepen into anything real.